You're coming too.
From Washington State to now sunny California, we've been at it for 5 years. It began with selling our previous boat and taking that money to buy tools and build a shed. We assembled keel pieces, poured the ballast, and raised all 16 frames in the first 6 months.
There's a boat in there.
Now, half a decade later, and at a slower but steady pace, we're in the water. We're Salt and Tar, and this is our life. Like, subscribe, and support if you can. We're back on the boat and ready to rig our deadeyes. The bottom deadeye is a blend of old and new because we're using Dyneema.
First thing is measure out for my splice, and so I'm using the locking Brummel splice. I've never done much of this fancy Dyneema splicing. I've always just done 3-strand splicing, but it's actually incredibly easy. It's pretty nice. So start out with making a mark that's 50 times the diameter of the line. So for us, that's 6 1/4 for our 1/8 inch line. Okay, so that's 50 times the diameter of the line. And then after that, I measure how much I want for the eye on the end. So from the measurements I got from the last ones I did, so that's 3 1/2. So 1, 2, 3 1/2. Okay, so let's see if I remember how to do this. I've only done one of these because it's a different, it's a super easy splice if you have both ends that you can work with. But I forgot when I was doing my first one, getting all the measurements and everything. I looped everything, got it cut, and then my plan was to measure that whole line from tip to tip. But then I made my whole first splice on it, and I forgot to measure it. And I didn't want to take the splice out, so I just measured it from the splice back. So unless I want to kind of go back to the drawing board, I'm just going to keep doing it that way. So that means that I have to do both of them with the kind of splice that is it's not hard. They're both easy, but this one's just a little bit like one more step, or 2 more steps really. Just go straight through the middle. Crochet hook is not the most convenient thing to splice this kind of stuff. A little splicing fit would be better, but I don't have one, or don't really have anything I can make it out of right now. So I have my 2 marks, so I pull to meet those 2 marks up.
Oh, I see.
Pull the loop through it. So it's twisted now. So now what we have to do is pull this line back through itself to take the twist out. Okay, twist is out. So that's the locked eye right there.
That is cool.
Make sure that little marks are still matched up, and then what you want to do is figure out where your tail is going to stretch up to, and then go a little bit past it, and then open it up. Again, there's an actual tool made for this, but I just made my own little rig out of a bit of seizing wire and a little chunk of black locust. It does the trick. So then you just go right into the middle and just feed down, trying to make sure that you don't come out of the side or like snag any bits that are on the side. So I'm gonna go right through the middle, and it's hollow, so it's fairly easy. And you want to come out, try not to go like in the middle of any strands. Trying to make a pretty clean exit. There we go. On my little doohickey here, I just kind of pull it open so I can get that through.
And that's your tail?
Yep. Slide it up and it kind of self-clamps. And then just work it up through in this part. It is a lot easier if you have a little splicing fid, because you don't have to work that kind of like fat kind of lump through there, but it's still easy. I mean, it's not hard at all. Okay, so you got that out. You don't want to lose your tail right now. All right. And then you pull that back like that, and then go about halfway down your tail, because then you want to taper it to finish it off. So as it goes, the line gets smaller. So separate the weave on my marks, pull one out like that. Trying to make sure that I only get the one strand and don't hook into other strands. Okay, so I got that out. Then take my rigging knife and cut. Okay, so that. Let me go to the next row up. So now, it's kind of the fun part. So now you gotta work that in and just suck it right in.
Wow, that's cool.
And you just work that in a little bit.
Wicked simple.
Bam. Splice done.
You can hardly tell. Beautiful.
If I didn't mess up with the measurements and everything, that should be just enough to kind of stretch that, yep, right over the eye.
Right on. And then it gets tighter because you're going to serve it after you get your loops around the dead eye?
Yeah, because here's the first one I did, my kind of trial run. This is there's 5 strands on both sides.
Instead of welding, bending, or cutting steel, we've gone a more modern route and are layering up Dyneema, which is said to be 15 times stronger than steel by weight.
And these will be clamped down a little bit more when they're actually on the chain plate. So we've got a groove in the top of the dead eye, and then so that fits perfectly right in there. And then of course the whole thing will be slushed. I'll just dip this whole guy in a bucket of slush, and then it'll all be blackened.
And the dead eyes in a bucket of teak oil or something?
The dead eyes will finish sand and clean everything up. I need to clean these up a little bit, finish sand everything, and then I'll just throw all the dead eyes in a bucket of linseed oil, boiled linseed oil.
Maybe more explanation than you wanted, but this is a typical morning for us. I did put a how-to link in the description below if you do want more info.
It's really tight.
Yeah.
It's so stiff. It's just where we want it though.
Awesome. Look at that.
Hell yeah.
As the day passed overhead, Garrett spliced one end, then the other. We nearly served every one before we lost our light. We're running a little bit slow today. Waking up out of the cave is difficult when it's slightly overcast. So another cup of coffee and we'll get started. One more to serve up?
Mm-hmm.
Good morning, Swab. You ready for your pill? Come here. Come here. Sit. Sit. Good boy. High five. Good boy. And we're already strung up. Last one.
Last one.
Garrett says he just dry fit the first upper deadeye. I'm working on the video in here, but I welcome any chance to take a break and check out something cool on the boat. Woohoo!
Of course it's a dry fit. The final product will have 3-strand, not yacht braid. But just
a representation.
Just throwing it up to get a feel for it. Kind of where I want to, where I want everything to be, and test out the new whatever you want to call them for the lower deadeyes that we just made.
I guess.
Strops.
Strops.
Deadeye strops.
Deadeye strops. Now we finished the fourth and final one this morning. You think that's about the height you're gonna have the upper off the?
Thinking.
Yeah.
Because it
looks pretty good.
Well, I want it a little bit higher because once you really cinch down on it, it's probably gonna come down another, I don't know, at least 3/4 of an inch. But I kind of want to get them. I guess I'll kind of take them individually and just kind of cinch down on them a little bit by hand like this, just to the point where I can get the cable more or less straight and get the lanyards up off the cap rail. I mean, you're not going to get the cable taut by hand. That's just not going to happen. I mean, you can get it taut, but it's not going to be like really tight. But I figure what I'll do is I'll kind of do each one where if I kind of cinch down on it like this, and I think I'm going to just measure off the cap rail, not overall length, so that because there's so much shear in the boat,
just a little.
But actually, now that I think about it, it would be the same, because this raises with the shear, this raises, it all raises with the deck, so
yeah,
it'll be the same.
Yeah.
6 1/2 dozen the other. You can see I've got a temporary cable clamp on it just to hold everything in place. So what I'll probably do is just mark it with this all kind of in place, and then just cut it.
And we've made them long, so it's definitely not going to be that long.
Oh no.
It's going to be what? Like first here, second here kind of deal?
No, like second here.
Okay, pretty close to each other.
It's going to be pretty tight. Gotta make a decision, I guess, a final decision.
On height?
I don't like the look of really, really long dead eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that looks about right with knowing that it's gonna shorten up just a little bit.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it looks about right to me. Like, I think ultimately I'd prefer them just a bit shorter, but they're gonna be a bit shorter once we really stitch down on it. This shroud is still super loosey-goosey, so it's still, if I really cinch down, it would still come down a fair amount. But I think if I do this way for all of them, I think they will all come down a little bit, but I don't think they'll come down much. I mean, maybe like a ½ inch or something, I don't know, 5/8. I have no idea, but
we'll find out, huh?
Yeah. It depends on how much movement, you know, how much the top of the mast, or how much the mast kind of leaned when I cinched on it, but I don't think it would lean that much because I actually have block and tackle on the other side, and both those temporary shrouds that we have up on block and tackle are Dacron, so it's pretty low stretch. And with the block and tackle, I can get a lot more force than me just kind of like, you know, just kind of lightly sweating on the lanyards on the dead eyes. I mainly just want to keep them off of the cap rails. We put the channels in before we decided to go with real bulwarks, before we ripped out the old bulwarks. So I knew I wanted tall bulwarks because I always wanted tall real ship's bulwarks. These ones clear beautifully. The mizens probably aren't going to clear. What I can do is just take a little bite out of the cap rail. So if the mizens don't clear, I'll just make a nice clean cut around like that if it's close. But if it's not close, we can remake the chain plates, which I'd hate to do, or I could just make some nice hardwood backing or hardwood blocks to kind of like pop the chain plates off the hull a little bit. Won't make much of a difference. They already stick way the hell off the hull, so I'm not worried about making more of a snagging point, because come on. Come on.
They're monsters.
Plus, if they snag anything, I will feel sorry for the thing that they snag.
Yeah. So they're left long, our chain plates there are left long because when they bent them, they said it was easier to make the bend that we wanted if they were long. So the ends will still be trimmed. And we've just got the first bolt, since we don't know their exact positioning yet. Might be tweaked fore, aft a little bit. They're sort of mock-up number one.
What we'll use on the, this is for our halyard, so it's a little bit thicker, but it's the exact same line, it's just thinner. But this is what we'll use for the dead eyes. It's 3-strand Dacron. 3-strand in itself is always going to be stretchier than a more modern braid, but since it's Dacron, it's pretty low stretch for 3-strand, and it still looks nice and traditional. This line right here, this is our halyards, but the other stuff, the stuff that we're using for the dead eyes, is slightly thinner. It's 3/8 inch, which is the same diameter of our rigging.
And then this part will be served.
Yeah. All the holes where the lines go through, just trying to make them nice and soft around the corners so there's no chafe points or anything. And then just kind of give the face a little final sand, and then once they're all done, then we'll throw them all in a bucket full of linseed oil and let them sit for, I mean, the longer the better.
Can't we all be like this guy? He's got the better. He knows what's up.
Oh, schwabbers. I will leave them in here for at least a few days. Once we take them out, I'll just dump, there'll be a lot of linseed oil left over obviously, so I'll just dump that back into the can, reuse it. But let these soak up as much as they can.
Bucket of mainmast deadeyes.